Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm Carrie Barber's apprentice, and this is Outer Limits Tattoo in Long Beach. So a little bit about our shop. This building was opened in 1922. It's called the Sovereign Apartment Complex. It started out as an apartment complex, and it still is an apartment complex today. This area is the basement of the apartment complex, and tattooing has been happening here since 1927. The size of the space is the size of 7 condominiums. We are the only original structure left from the Pike Amusement area, which was an area in Long Beach that was open from 1902 to 1979, and I can show you some photos of it. So these are some images of the Pike Amusement Zone, and the Pike was essentially just an area where families would come and have fun. It was known as the Coney Island of the West. There were roller coasters, there were carnival attractions, there were games, there was even a bathhouse. It was on the beach. The roller coaster was actually right over the water, so people would go to the beach, just have a good time. Tattooing started happening on the Pike in the 20s, and again, specifically in the shop in 1927. It wasn't a successful business at the time because tattooing just wasn't really mainstream or publicly known about. So if you got tattoos, it was usually in secret. If you openly got tattoos, then people really frowned down on you at the time. But eventually that changes and tattooing becomes huge, and part of the reason why I can show you an image over here that's always kind of fun to show. Okay, so this is a picture of our building in 1924. That's it right there, and so we're at the very bottom. This is where the water was at that time, so you can tell that it's a lot closer to the building than it is now. Now they have since pushed everything back since 1940. They installed something called a breakwater, which is a 50-foot wall. It really just does that. It's just a wall that pushes everything back. And what they did that for at the time was we had a shipyard in the 40s, a naval shipyard, so all the Navy would come in, and that led to all the sailors coming onto the Pike and getting tattooed. So after the 40s, there became a big boom of tattooing on the Pike. It just became a huge success. Yeah. So at the top is Lawrence Lee Mckeever. He worked on the Pike from the 20s to the 50s. He's actually one of the earlier known tattooers on the Pike. We found him through the city directories. Other than that, it's hard to find any mention of him, and we actually found that image from his, I think, great nephew had posted it online. And then underneath him is Frank Julian. He worked on the Pike as well for a short time. I believe that his wife was Alice Julian, or known as Alice from Dallas. She was a circus fat lady who weighed about 600 pounds, and she also worked on there as a circus attraction. Below Frank Julian is someone that is very well known as Huey Bowen. Below Frank Julian is Huey Bowen. He was great friends with Burt Grimm. Eventually, he and his wife, who was known as Painless Nell, owned I think a small chain of tattoo shops in San Diego. They were a force to be reckoned with. He worked on the Pike for a short amount of time, I think only from like 1929 to the 30s. Underneath him is Frederick William Mckee. He worked on the Pike from the 1920s to the 1940s. We don't really know much about him other than just seeing his name in the city directories. Below that is Harry Vivian Lawson, worked on the Pike from the 40s to I think 1950. I believe he passed shortly after working on the Pike, but before that he was also very known. He also did tattoo removal on the Pike as well.
What kind of removal?
We don't know. He had his own, he had his own secret formula. So a lot of tattooers on the Pike at the time would do tattoo removal as well, you know. And then during the 40s, there's also doctors who were doing it, but they would just cut the skin off. So, you know, I'm assuming that whatever they did on the Pike was probably some type of concoction that was made with like lime juice and salt. Typically it's something like that, but we don't know. He said it was a secret. So below that is Frank Martin. He worked on the Pike from the 40s to the 50s. He was first a circus attraction turned tattooer. After that, Jack Julian. He owned his own shop on the Pike in the 50s. Don't know much about him either, unfortunately. And then below him is Lawrence Walter Duff. He's also known as Duffy. He worked on the Pike from the 40s to the 50s. This is the only photo I've ever seen of him, and I found it in a Long Beach newspaper. I believe it was Long Beach Press Telegram. There's not much that I've read about him that was good. People say that he was a really bad, like, sidewalk salesman, and his tattoos were awful as well. But that's what they say. Tattooing became very popular on the Pike. This shop actually became the most popular shop to come on the Pike, and the reason being was someone named Burt Grimm. Burt is the most famous tattooer to come out of the Pike, as well as the shop. This is him right here. People think that he owned the shop from the beginning, but he actually only owned it in '54 and owned it for about 15 years, till '69. But yeah, Burt came in, took over the shop in '54. By '56, he owned 5 of the 12 tattoo shops on the Pike, which is very impressive. His only major competitor on the Pike was someone named Captain Jim Malonson. So you came from either the Burt Grimm family or the Jim Malonson family. A little bit about Burt. People say that, or it's been rumored that he learned to tattoo from his father, or that he ran away with the circus when he was 15 and learned to tattoo there, and the rest is history, right? I believe that it's probably a combination of both. So while he was tattooing here, he was the best self-promoter. He became famous by just saying that he was the world famous Burt Grimm. And what he would do is he would tattoo people. About 2/3 through the tattoo, he would sit back, throw his suspenders on, put a toothpick in his mouth, and he would tell them, okay, now it's time for my famous 10-minute speech. And from there, he would tell them these crazy stories about how he tattooed Bonnie and Clyde, Pretty Boy Floyd, and no one really knew if they were true or not, but they were so illustrative and like whimsical that people loved it. And throughout the 10-minute speech, he would also tell them that he was the greatest tattooer in the world. And eventually that just caught wind, and everyone was like, I want to go get tattooed by the greatest tattooer in the world. So yeah, we believe that his wife tattooed as well. There's not really evidence of it. She was always photographed in her white smock, which you really only wore if you tattooed, and she was with him since 1931 till they both passed. So it just seems like, you know, kind of no doubt that she probably tattooed. There's a photo down here where it looks like she might be tattooing. However, people do debate that you never see her touching the needle to the skin, so was she really tattooing? So Burt owned it until '69. After that, he sold or gave the shop to his nephew, Bob Shaw, and we have a photo of Bob right over here as well. So this is Bob Shaw. That was Burt Grimm's protege and nephew, who eventually owns the shop after Burt. So the shop stays in the Shaw family until Carrie took it over. What happens is Bob owns it. He eventually passes in 1993, unfortunately, so then it goes to his wife, Wanda. Wanda passes in 2002, so then it goes to their sons, Larry and Bobby, who were already tattooers in Texas. They decided they wanted to close the inheritance and sent an eviction notice to the people working here at the time. Rick Walters, who was managing the shop since '77 until the end of it, approached Carrie and told her that he felt like she would be the one to carry the history on. At the time, Carrie already had other shops, and the commitment seemed a bit too sudden because she already had Anaheim, she had Orange, and she had Costa Mesa. So she passed on that, but one day she drove by and she saw that the shop was permanently closed, and it was like that for 2 days, and she decided she had to do something. So from there, Carrie sells everything, decides to purchase the shop, and as I said earlier, the space is 7 condominiums, so that meant she had to purchase all 7. Eventually she sold her house because she decided that she could always get another house, but she couldn't get another one of these shops. Since then, it's been her duty to carry everything out and to continue the history. We renovate the area all the time to try and just, you know, keep things fresh and learn more as we go. And I can show you some other images as well from when we picked it up, because it looked vastly different from what it looks like now. As I mentioned earlier as well, there were a bunch of different walls because the way that this area was set up was it was arcade style. So even though tattooing started happening here in 1927, it wasn't the only business that was happening here. There was a dry cleaner, there was a barber shop, there was a fortune teller, and every business had their own little front door in here. So we knocked down all the walls when we came in, and I'd love to show you photos of how the shop looked when we got here. So this is just the condition of the shop and the way it looked when we took it over. These photos were taken by Carrie's daughter, Mckee. This is at the end of 2002. What we did was there were a bunch of different walls and different sections, and we knocked them down. There were different things that also needed to be updated in order for us to reopen the shop. So the shop doesn't actually reopen for another 3 years until about 2006. It was so many different things that the city was fighting Carrie over. They were as simple as, you know, installing new plumbing that would somehow fit in with the old plumbing, because again, the building is from 1922. Things like that were just not working out. There wasn't even a bathroom in here. We since now have 2 bathrooms. The electrical, there were all these different obstacles that Carrie had to jump over. We knocked a bunch of walls down, so there were these little weird hidden sections. One of the walls that we knocked down, we shined a light in and we found 3 of these in there. What this is a storefront window. So usually you'd be able to look behind it, but we have since mounted it onto a white vinyl in order to get it out safely and intact. What had happened to the other 2 was they were smaller ones, but they didn't make it out. They're gone. So we're lucky that we still have this one. This we estimate to be from the 1960s and hand painted by Bert's nephew, Bob Shaw. This is a photo of Bert's wife, Julia, in front of the shop in the 60s. And this over here is what those storefront windows were. Since then, they have been retrofitted and cement has been poured in them, so they're just a normal wall now, normal walls. But that is where the storefront windows were at the time. And again, you could see through them too. The way that they used to ship everything in was in these 55-gallon industrial vats. They would ship Vaseline and ink powders in here, and then, you know, with the ink powders, they would mix them in the back. But what we have here is a vat of Vaseline that we have not disturbed at all. If you want to take a look at it, I can open it up for you. But they used to just scoop it out in plastic containers, you know, so that they could put their acetate stencils on, or for their clients when they were tattooing. It's pretty gross. But yeah, we still have that. Okay, so we knocked another wall down. We didn't know what was in there because the section looked like maybe it was a water heater or something, but when we took it out, it was a safe. We don't know what's in it. We'll probably open it in 7 years on the 100-year anniversary, so maybe we'll live stream it or something, but it'll be fun. Yeah, everyone's always like, how come you guys don't try to find out? But I think we just, the anticipation's kind of fun, right? You know, if I could dream what's in it, I would love it to be photographs. Yeah, I would want it to be photographs or something that we couldn't get any other way, because money comes and goes, right? But the history of it, if we could get something that just tells us a little more, I think that would be really wonderful. As I said earlier, the Pike was open from 1902 to 1979. One of the earlier tattooers on the Pike, who is also very well known, is someone named Owen Jensen, and this is him right here. He worked on and off at the Pike throughout his whole career, and then at some point he comes back and he ends his career there as well. In 1976, at a shop just a hop and skip down the way, some hooligans come in and they beat him up for $30. And during this time, the Pike was already kind of diminishing, so it feels sad to say that as that legend passes, the Pike is also, you know, essentially gone. It's very different from what it was then, but since we're the last remaining structure from it, I hope that we can always keep it alive, because that's Carrie's mission, and we're here today. What Carrie has cultivated at our shop is so special. Literally, this is free to the public to come in and look at any time. So we get people from all over the world visiting. We love it when people visit. We love to share this with you, because at the end of the day, tattoo history is history. It's important. So please come by anytime. Yeah, we'd love to have you. Our address is 22 South Chestnut Place in Long Beach, California.